I'm going to hand over to Dan and to Sam to explore this particular session.
Hi, everyone. Yeah,
Hello.
thanks for having us. Really pleased to be here. I want to start off with a saying by one of our fellow foresight practitioners who says, if it looks the same as today, then it isn't the future. And we don't actually realize that a lot of what's been said around the table today is where other people have colonized the future for us. And Heather mentioned earlier this morning the idea that we actually lack agency. And when people are colonizing our future, we become conditioned to do what other people want us to do instead of sort of having agency over our own lives. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by reading out a narrative by a local psychologist, Dr. Naomi Fisher, who some of you may know. She's an author and writes and speaks about trauma, autism, and alternative education. And I think the reason why this is important is because we don't realize that the Western education system was designed all those years ago, in some respects, to create human robots. And today it's dominated the Western world, and we're still running to the same education system. What I wanted to say is that it taught us to become linear thinkers. So you either had to fit in the box, or you, like myself, you actually fitted out of the box. And those who fitted in the box either were linear thinkers, which is great because we need linear thinkers, or you became a conditioned linear thinker, and then you've gone against how you're naturally wired. And then those people like Dan and I, who largely go against the status quo, because of how we're naturally wired, went traversed life and thought, well, where do we actually fit in? I think Daniel probably fit in a lot better than I did, but Naomi's narrative here really sums things up so nicely. So this is just from me, the first sentence. Loving learning can be empowering and wonderful, yet education can be so destructive to our authenticity. And she goes on to say, what a strange thing we do to our young people in this culture and time. We make them spend several years learning things that they often have no interest in, and they have not chosen, and they will in many cases never use again. We tell them that these things are vitally important. Then we sit them in rows and we make them write about things they can remember for an intense few hours. We compare what they have written down with everyone else of the same age, and then we rank them. We make them wait for a couple of months, and then we tell some that they're successes and others that they are failures. We encourage them to hang their self-worth on how they performed. Newspaper publishers pictures of the delighted whilst the disappointed hide their head in shame. We tell them that these results will determine the rest of their lives, and then we set up systems that make this true. We provide fewer opportunities for those who did not succeed. Those who did well can take their pick of courses, while those who did not are made to take the same tests again and again just to hammer it home. We make sure that young people spend the majority of their adolescence focused on exams and under pressure. Every summer they sit in rows and try to remember. Each year they're told that their whole future rests on this. Many of them inevitably cave in under the pressure. They become anxious, they become depressed. They show signs of burnout by the age of 16. They lose their spark and just go through the motions. Some of them retreat altogether. Then we pathologize them, say that they need mental health treatment or to become more resilient. We send them for therapy or give them medication. We say that they are the problem, whilst the system carries on unchanged. But what if instead we stop to think about what we are doing to our young people? Adolescence is a time of opportunity and vulnerability. It's a one-off stage of life. What if we asked ourselves, should our young people really spend these years on a conveyor belt of high-stake exams? Imagine we allowed ourselves to look beyond this time and place and to see just how strange this really is. What would we do then?
Wow, that's very powerful.
Yeah, I think
working in a school, having worked in schools for over 20 years, I really can feel the truth in what's being said there. And I've noticed it, and I've noticed the demeanor of children over the last 25 years change. I think there's a lot of factors to bring into that. I think it is the system, but I think what's also happened is we've got social media, and we've got screens, and we've got all these other inputs which are causing more and more disconnection from people and who they really are, and people are spending far less time actually identifying with who they are. And if you think, actually the system is almost encouraging that, it's encouraging people to, I was talking to people earlier today and just saying, we get children in school, in nursery, reception, and then those that are kind of fit the system, who can kind of sit and do their learning, they're kind of do okay. But there's so many that doesn't suit, and they're told off, told they're no good, made to feel like they're no good, and they have to kind of numb themselves to that feeling. They have to separate themselves from their feelings, from their what their passions are, their curiosity, and I think it's that cutting off of just natural instincts, which is one of the biggest things that is causing this problem. And it's what we're training our children to do. And it's like, then they get up to secondary school, and it's all about exams and all about training them to pass that big exam at the end of their school year, school life, which is going to make the difference for them in the future. So it's fear driven, a lot of it. And then it's again, just then I've lost my train of thought now, but it's that conditioning of what's important in their life, and not what their heart is telling them, not what direction they want to go in, and doing it for the reasons that they can feel themselves. It's shut all those feelings off, and actually do this because we're telling you that this is what you need to do, and this is what you should be doing. And if you're not, then you don't fit in, and you're not going to have a good future. So I think it's that which worries me the most about the current system, is that we're kind of conditioning our children into this way of thinking, and then we're also not allowing maybe the time around school, which would have been traditionally with family, in community, where they were nourished, where they had those connections, where they were kind of being outside with nature, and they were getting all that input. They don't get that anymore either. They're stuck in bedrooms, on social media, on screens. The families are often too busy to give them attention, or if they are, they're half talking to them while they're on their phones. So the disconnect is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. The distractions are becoming more and more and more, and so they're not sitting with themselves. And actually, when we talking about meditation, and talking about Wim Hof, and talking about all these things that we've heard today, it's all about bringing that connection back to them. And actually, unfortunately, wouldn't it be amazing if schools taught meditation and taught the principles that that you gain out of Wim Hof, and that discomfort, putting themselves into those uncomfortable positions, rather than everyone running around after them trying to.
There are some schools that have actually put meditation in, and I'm sure people around here know. But I think it's important to actually go back to understand how we got to now, and then say, how do we start to look at things in the future? So if you go back to the idea of what is the focus of the systems today, and how has it been for the last couple of centuries, it's been about financial metrics. And this is where the linearity actually comes into it. So in a world that is driven by capitalism and these economic value metrics, so we don't care about humanity. We don't care about how people are naturally wired, which brings me back to the idea of saying, why are so many children today suffering with mental health issues? Are they mental health issues? We need to disrupt the thinking to be asking the right questions, and not always because around the table here are a whole lot of change makers. And like I said, with the original thing of, if it looks the same as today, then it isn't the future. So we need to be speaking differently. So one of the things that I often say is, why don't children know who they are when they leave school?
Yeah.
How can you possibly be authentic when you're not actually taught how you're naturally wired? So part of my work for the last 10 years has been on how people are intrinsically wired, which indicates how you're intrinsically motivated. To look at people who leave school not knowing who they are, they go into a work environment or into a university environment where they have to be on antidepressants to get through their degree. They then go into a job that doesn't fit them. And for many years, we've had at least 80% of people that are unhappy in their work. And even just sitting around the table today, chatting to a couple of you guys over there and realizing, you know, adversity has kind of shaped their path. For some of you, it's been with brain tumors or ill health and so on. But what if you actually left school understanding who you were, and you could be running through school being your authentic self? What would it look like then?
It's interesting. You're saying, I think I'm just going to move the camera slightly, bring it back a bit. There we go. What you were saying, Dan, and what you're both saying, in a way, it can create an internal conflict for the child in terms of their passion and their desire versus what everybody's telling them they should be doing. And that internal conflict has got to show itself in some way. And that may well show itself in various forms of illnesses, disruptions.
Anxiety being one of the biggest ones today.
All the changes that are going to behaviours that you're seeing.
Even if you, I think Gabor Mate was mentioned earlier today, and if you look at what he puts down as the major cause of ill health is people pleasing, and it's doing something that is for someone else rather than actually for yourself, and essentially that's what's happening with with what we're doing here. I think that one of the bigger issues again is, when you think about the purpose of education, to prepare children for their rest of their life, and obviously to fit into society and to be contributing to society. And I think this is what we were saying when we had our chat before, is that what is the purpose of our society? And I think that's the big question, because I think for a lot of children, what they're told is the purpose is to make money, and or get fame and be successful, and this is therefore setting them up to be I guess malleable to fit to the system that schools are offering, because that's the only reason to do this stuff. It's the only reason to go and sit through all these lessons, learn all this,
and they're losing sight of fundamental aspect of who they are actually, in that they're losing the an aspect of the my train of thought's gone, because Graham Graham's behind me and he indicated something and I was thinking of something. They are not looking clearly at an aspect of nature. That's what I was meaning. It's that they don't have that time in nature, and therefore they lose the fact that they are actually really meant to see themselves as being connected with that world, and they are so disconnected with the natural world.
This is what I think this is where the correction needs to happen, really, is that the purpose of society should be about how we are contributing to community, to nature, to building a world where we collaborate. And I think it's this competitive nature which is one of the biggest problems, that it's all about who can I step on to get my next move up, and who can I oh, look, I've done better than you in this test. And, you know, so it's all, instead of realizing that, like today, we're all here collaborating, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts.
And that's the word, collaboration, not competition.
And it makes you feel safe when you're collaborating, when you're part of a tribe and you feel connections to other people. But our system is all about kind of, there were elements. I mean, it's, you know, we're taking it maybe to the extremes at time here, but certainly the direction is much more in that way rather than the collaborative way of working.
That's got to change somehow, because the competition, the sense of competition creates that conflict again, because and then you feel you've got, well, with any kind of competition, you've got that sense of winners and losers, and that's not really very helpful.
But maybe the point is, if we all knew who we were and we knew what our purpose was to contribute, because we all contribute differently because of how we're wired.
Yeah.
Would you feel competitive, or would you actually come to the table and say, I know I can do X, I need you to do Y, or so on and so forth? So you change the focus of the system away from independent dependent to interdependence.
Yeah, look at what we could do together, as opposed to, you know, everyone knows that when you work as part of a team, how you end up with something far greater than if you're trying to do something on your own.
By design, isn't it?
Yeah, because you've got all of those shared talents that
which kind of comes back to the idea of saying, if you've created a one-size-fits-all system, we're all competing to be that one size.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're more accepting of the fact that we're all unique by design, it becomes more interdependent.
Just going online, Debbie has put in yes, but more so after COVID, and we must not forget that many students also had struggled before, did very well during COVID.
Is Debbie able to speak at all?
Debbie, can you come on?
Many of our children, sadly, have such significant trauma that they are coming into school with each day, and they do not, I'm talking about a tiny group of people. I'm not suggesting meditation isn't wonderful. I'm just saying we need to be mindful that it's not something that is going to work for everyone. And we see that as a problem when schools roll it out and don't think about the child whose parents have died or who've been taken into care or whatever other awful situation that they're living with. The last thing they need is quiet.
But doesn't it come back to, again, the one-size-fits-all approach?
Exactly.
Just giving students more self-awareness about their bodies, about what's happening, you know, with doing some breath work and getting them to notice what happens, getting them to notice where tension is in their body, and making that connection between, you know, their feelings and the chemical reactions that are taking place and the hormones. And I think just giving them that self-awareness and some tools to explore and experiment is the way forward, because then they can manage themselves and they can cope with different situations. But I think we're almost doing the opposite a lot of the time. We're just giving them distractions. Well, you know, go and have a play on your phone, go and you know, go and look at social media, go and do these things, which stops them actually ever having any time alone. I think there was some report that's kind of said that, you know, pre-smartphone, we would have loads of time to ourselves, which you could call meditation in some ways, you know, queuing up at the post office, or, you know, walking to school, walking the dog. Whereas now, very rarely do we find our young people unplugged from their phones, so they aren't having any alone time, if you like.
And then what are your thoughts on medicalizing too many things within children's lives?
Yeah, again, I mean, this is I think a real issue. It's not, you know, I think parents are looking for an excuse and looking for, you know, to get their child extra support in school. So the moment they show any kind of symptoms of, you know, ADHD or inability to concentrate and focus, they want a diagnosis, which means that then they're going to get that extra support in school.
But I just want to interrupt, but if you look underneath and say, what is the parent really saying? And I've heard it around the table today, they're saying, please, can we just have some help?
Yeah.
You know, if you think capitalism's actually broken down societies, it's broken down communities, it's broken down families. I was saying to my husband now over the past couple of days that his company's been doing a lot of team building. And I'm saying, how often do we do team building in our marriage? How often do we do team building in our family? And, you know, we've broken the fabric of society down. And that comes back to what...
And I think, yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's combined with the fact that there's this narrative that, you know, illness has to be fixed by someone else, you know, or any kind of symptoms, any dysregulation needs a doctor or needs somebody to fix it, as opposed to being empowered to take responsibility for that yourself. And us teaching children, well, you know, okay, so you're feeling, you know, like you can't control your emotions today. Well, how was your sleep last night? And do you think those 3 cans of Coke before you came to school was a good idea? And, you know,
or even worse, how did you feel that your father was busy beating your mother up last night? Because that's gender-based violence is very real. And how that dysregulates a person's... And then they come into the school environment. Nobody has any time to actually say to the child, you know, you'd look a bit... There just isn't time. And it's this system that just keeps ploughing along. And you know, if I look around the room today, it's been a community intervention where people actually care. And, you know, if we got all 8 billion people involved in, you know, caring about each other, so many of those issues that people have would because they're not medical conditions, they're humanitarian conditions.
I was going to say, one of the big things I see at the shed time and time again is when we stop round the table for a cup of tea. We do that at 11 o'clock and then we have lunch at 12. Now, that might seem a bit radical to most people, but actually what that does is invoke a sense of slowing down to stop. We might only be there for 20 minutes, half an hour at most, and then people get back up and want to carry on. So there is a structure in it, although it doesn't look like it. And the fact that they're welcome to come in just for a cup of tea, it means that it doesn't matter how they're feeling. If they're on a bad day, that's fine. Nobody's going to force them to try and say, I've got to perform this or I've got to do that. It's about them finding their level and where they're comfortable. And it's massive in how many people within the first 10, 20 minutes of being in the shed go, yeah, okay, sign me up. I want to come.
Lynn, because we've actually forgotten that we're human first.
Yes, absolutely.
Is everyone familiar with the blue zones? The biggest thing is the community.
It is.
So you're describing that we live in a society of separation, and community is the key thing.